it's weird because this seems more divided than his move to either Golden State or even the move to Brooklyn from Golden State. I've heard perspectives of he's tired of dealing with Kyrie, and I don't blame him for trying to deal with this headache. But I've also heard the other
But he
side.
created that headache himself because he wanted to go play with them because they were boys.
So that's the other side that I've heard. And I've also heard you sign a contract for 4 years, $198 million, and you don't even stay past a quarter of it. You don't fulfill a quarter of that contract.
Yeah, because he didn't play the first year.
Exactly. So that's where, the contract extension came in at 2021. So this would have been, I think, the first year of that $198 million contract.
Oh, right, because he signed like a 2-year deal or something like that, and then
exactly.
he signed the extension after they made it to the semis last year.
So let's do the classic clickbait. How does this affect KD's legacy?
I mean, he was always going to have a it's always
he's a top 10 scorer all time, arguably top 5.
And for me, like, I definitely don't look at it as like, I think I'm in the minority because one of the things about KD, and it's not about like him bolting the Golden State, which yes, was like, like whatever people want to say, oh, well, he had to get away from Westbrook, blah, blah, blah. The one thing that has always annoyed me about KD, there's two things. One is that I think he's a curmudgeon, and he gets way too like angry and like holds grudges on people when they're just doing their job. And yeah, I get it. Some journalists go over the edge, but it's like Bill Simmons did like 7 interviews with him or whatever, 5, 6, 7, whatever. And then like he said one thing about him, and like KD won't even talk to him anymore. And it wasn't even like a bad thing. And it's like, dude, like get off the rag. Like not to be a sexist when I say that, but like, come on, like don't be a bitch. But like, secondly, it's like I never understood why Ross is the guy who gets all the shit for the 2016 collapse when KD was just as horrible, if not worse than him. The whole team sucked. That whole team shit the bed. It was coaching, it was the players. Yes, Russ was bad, but in my opinion, KD disappeared more than Ross in 2016. But because he bolted and then just had his people create this narrative about how it was Russ, that it was because of Russ. And then everyone's like, well, yeah, Russ sucked so much in those last 3 games. It's like, no, they all sucked. And KD was probably one of like the 2 worst people, but no one ever brings that up. And I just don't understand that. Like, go back and watch those games and you'll understand. Like, people will understand. Like, he sucked. He was terrible. And he hid from big moments too.
Well, and there was, I think, the years after that playoff loss where Russ is averaging a triple-double.
Right.
And it solidifies this perception that he has the ball the entire time he was in OKC. So he must be the reason why that team collapsed. And I agree. It's completely unfair to blame an entire collapse on one player unless it's like a really bad game-winning shot or something like that.
Listen, like game 6, you can throw that out because Clay just went supernova. Right?
Game 6 Clay.
And they could have won that game. They could have. And it was, I believe, KD who missed a couple shots at the end, and then Russ missed the game winner, so it's just blamed on him. But I just never understood why he was constantly, and then he goes to Golden State, and then he's moody that people were like, well, this is still Curry's team. Like, what did you think, my man? Like, you're not just going to walk into a situation with a team that has made it to back-to-back finals, won one of them, and, blew the other one, and you're just going to become the leading man. There's clearly a reason they are back-to-back finalists.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he just was moody about that. And then he went to the Nets and he got even more like diva-esque. And that's when I wasn't a big fan of him in college because he went to Texas and fuck Texas. Like, horns down all day, can't stand them. And I just, I couldn't stand the hype. But then the second he got drafted by the Sonics, who used to be my second favorite organization after the Sixers, until, they were robbed of their team, which, again, just we talked about it, how there's not a team in Seattle.
That'll get its own documentary one day.
Yeah. But and then I was like, okay, cool. I can like him now. Went to OKC. That team was fun. Loved him. And then, he went to Golden State, and it's like, I respect the player, but I think he bitched out and he screwed Russ over. And I get it that Russ is temperamental and he's probably not the easiest human to get along with. I think everybody understands that.
Yeah.
But it's just, as his career has gone along, he's just become more and more of a diva and temperamental. And it's just, he's
It's
just so
frustrating.
unlikable. He's unlikable, I feel like.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And I think that's where, kind of going back to our like athlete empowerment conversation that we had a few minutes ago, I think that's been the benefit of the athlete empowerment era, is that you get to hear from KD directly, whether it's his podcast or whether it's his show, The Boardroom or whatever. You get to hear his own personal perspective on these type of things. And even, I don't know if you watched the Draymond Green, JJ Redick, Old Man and the Three live show, just came out like last week, but Draymond
Is that the
talked.
one where there was like all this shit is being like everyone's like up in arms about, or that was something else?
Probably. I mean, it's Draymond, so
Oh no,
anything's
that was
possible.
JJ and Steven Smith, and then Draymond and uh Kendrick
Perk.
Perkins. My
Yeah.
apology. Yeah.
No, you're good. But in that podcast, Draymond talked about how like KD like kind of underestimated the public like pushback, and the Warriors did everything they could to like make him feel at home and make him feel like, hey, you're one of us. Like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to deal with all this other, public stuff. Like, we don't care about that. And it just gnawed at him pretty much. And I'm paraphrasing a lot. That being said, I don't blame, I never, at first I was mad about KD going to Golden State. And I was never really like, totally like pissed off about it. And as time went on, I understood why he had to do it. He had to get his championships, similar to what LeBron did going to Miami. And the move to Brooklyn was reasonable in the fact that you were going to a place that had never really won before. And if you win there in New York, in Brooklyn, you're a legend for life. And you have that one championship to say, I proved that I can win on my own. Now, I have questions going into year 16. Can KD win on his own as the number one guy? And it just seems like every time that's a challenge, he doesn't step up to it, whether it's him directly or indirectly not performing well, or other teammates aren't performing well. But now I have to, he's a top 10 scorer all time. But when it comes to winning and closing out, it seems like he is Will Chamberlain to LeBron's Bill Russell.
Right. And that's my point about 2016. Like that's exactly what I get at.
Yeah, it's like KD will put up unreal numbers and he'll be great, and he has 2 championships already, but he needs help, and most teams need help. But when it comes to winning in the big moments, I just haven't seen that from KD in 16 years. And these moves to big name teams like the Nets and the Warriors, who were 73 wins and had the greatest shooter of all time, that I have to hold that against you at some point. Like, I have to.